The Tao of Self-Confidence, Episode 922. Welcome to the Tao of Self-Confidence, where I share stories of amazing women who have discovered their inner journey to self-confidence. Visit our website at thetaoofselfconfidence.com. Your inner journey to self-confidence awaits. You can now purchase Bridging the Confidence Gap, How Empowered Women Change the World on Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, Indigo, and other book retailers sold worldwide. Get your copy today! Well, hello friend. Welcome to the Tao of Self-Confidence, where I share stories of amazing women who have discovered their inner journey to self-confidence. I'm your host today, Sheena Yap-Chan, and today I have an amazing woman on the show today. We've actually met in person in San Francisco last year. Super excited to have her on today. She is the founder of Career Unicorns, and I'm super excited to have her on and share her story with us. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Samorn Selim. Hey Samorn, how are you today? Maybe you can fill in a little bit more about yourself to the listeners.
Thanks so much for having me on the podcast, Sheena. I'm excited to be here. Today is so great. So about myself, I am the daughter of Lao refugees. My parents came here as a result of the Vietnam War and the U.S. secret wars in both Cambodia and Laos. And I grew up really poor. We were on public assistance. And I don't think a lot of people expected much from us. They expected us to not graduate from high school. They expected us to be welfare queens or be in gangs or sadly, a lot of people I grew up with are not alive anymore because of the circumstances that we were in. And that experience really informed my decisions about my own life and my career. I wanted to be a lawyer and pursue social justice. The year I graduated was 2009 when the economic recession happened. So there were no public interest or government jobs available. And so I ended up taking an offer at a big law firm. And that experience was just really hard to be the only Asian person in my entire litigation group in San Francisco, California, where we have one of the highest populations of Asian Americans. And I felt all the micro and macroaggressions, where people would say, your name's too hard to pronounce. It's Samorn. It's not that difficult, right? If you could pronounce Arnold Schwarzenegger, you could pronounce Samorn. And I would be expected to work really long hours, never be invited to client meetings. Whereas other people would roll in at 9 to 5 and they'd be like, oh yeah, they're busy. And I'm working 7 a.m. to 4 a.m. And they would say, oh, it's just another hour. So I felt like those experiences were really hard to process when I was in it. And after I realized this isn't for me, I don't want to live the rest of my life being in misery. But it was also hard. Imagine, being so poor, you don't have enough food to eat, to making six figures in your mid 20s in an office that's overlooking the Bay Bridge on the 31st floor. It was hard to walk away from all of that, but I did that and I ended up going to Berkeley Law to be a career counselor and its first director of employer outreach. And since then, I've been able to build Career Unicorns, where I'm supporting women, Black, Indigenous, people of color, and first generation professionals to build their dream careers and also to do it in a way that's both sustainable and thriving for them.
Thanks so much for sharing that story. And, I remember I met a lady who actually works for a nonprofit, and they mentioned that Laos is the most bombed country in the world. So they're doing everything they can to take out those bombs because it's still there now. And of course, that's a big danger if you're like walking to school and literally like your next step could be like a life or death situation. And it's wild to think that because it's like Laos is such a small country, and why would it be the most bombed country in the world? So it was just a little history fact that I wanted to share with you. And thank you so much for sharing that story. I think it's important to share where we come from. A lot of people hear the story, the glory, that they never hear the story behind it. And so I'm just grateful you're here today. And what'd be your favorite self-confidence quote?
Before I jump into the confidence quote, I wanted to say that I appreciate you bringing that up. Laos is a landlocked country. It's one of the smallest countries in the world. The reason why it was heavily bombed was because the U.S. had a secret war where the CIA brought Hmong. There are Hmong people who live in Laos, and the CIA with General Vang Pao brought on these Hmong individuals to come and be their secret army in Laos. And they were fighting the communists in Vietnam through that. And what would happen is they thought that because the Vietnamese were using the Ho Chi Minh Trail to transport supplies and weapons, they were heavily bombing that trail. And that trail happens to be through Laos and Cambodia. And anytime that the US couldn't use up all their bombs or unexploded ordnances, they drop it off in Laos. And they would particularly target villages, et cetera, because they were afraid that they were helping, quote, unquote, the enemy. And so that's the reason why that country is so heavily bombed. And the bombs there are more than all that was bombed in all of World War II, just to give context. So there is a foundation called Legacies of War that is working really hard to remove these ordinances. But because of the executive orders this year, where they're stopping US aid and other aid to foreign countries, it's really impacted that community heavily. So I did want to bring that up because I think it's so important to recognize that there's still all these things going on, the remnants of war. And to the self-confidence quote, I love that your books are all about confidence, like Bridging the Confidence Gap, the Tao Self-Confidence. I have both of your books. I've read them. They're really great. And the quote that I have, it's actually from my book, is small, consistent actions every day can lead to remarkable positive changes. And the reason why I share that is because you go to these leadership programs, usually 80% of them are by these straight white men who've had these amazing careers. Good for them. But they almost make it sound like you have to have this executive presence, that it's just normal. That's not true. Confidence comes from us being afraid and then still making a decision to take small actions to move in that way. And, for example, when I was younger, I was told that I was a bad writer. My honors economics high school teacher told me, good luck not flunking out of college. So for the longest time, I always felt like I'm a terrible writer. And of course, I needed work because I didn't have the training that a lot of my friends who were born where they had extra tutoring and things like that to write, poetry or to write in a way that was beautiful. But I worked really hard. I got into Berkeley for undergrad. I got into Berkeley for law school, and I worked for a big law firm. And those experiences allowed me to really hone my writing. And when I was actually going to write, this gratitude journal, the Career Unicorns 90-day 5-minute gratitude journal, an easy and proven way to cultivate mindfulness, beat burnout, and find career joy, I was told by the book experts not to write it. Because if you look on Amazon alone, there's over 60,000 gratitude journals. It's saturated. And they literally said, I wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. Like, that genre is too saturated. But for me, one of the things I realize is, there's going to be a lot of people who tell you your dreams are not real, your dreams are not possible, or that it's too hard. But if it is your dream and you feel it inside your body and in your heart that this is my calling, this is what I want to do, then take the small steps to do it. This book was in the making for 5 years in my mind and in writing it. And given what's going on in the world right now, I was like, I really need to put this book out there because I feel like so many people are so burnt out because of work, because of the pandemic, and because of what's going on in the world. And, just dedicating 15 to 30 minutes every day allowed me to finish this book. And I'm sure it's very similar to you. I know your story about how you wrote your first book or how you started this podcast. I remember a post where you're like, 5 years of thinking about this podcast and prepping for it. I'm like, oh my God, that was the same for my podcast. I was prepping for it for 5 years. And finally I was like, hey, I need to just record an episode.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that great quote. And it's so true. Like, have the small actual daily steps really yield the great results. And I think it's just start messy and figure things out as you go. So I love that quote that you mentioned. And in your own words, how do you define self-confidence?
How do I define self-confidence? That's such a good question. I feel like there were so many versions of what I thought self-confidence was. And a lot of it was external, right? I need to appear big. I need to take up space, etc. And I think it's because that's what experts tell you. But now that I'm turning 43 in September, I realize that self-confidence is really feeling safe in my body. And that sounds strange to some people because, like, oh, why wouldn't you feel safe in your body? But I think as an Asian woman who is petite, I'm short, right? I'm only 5'3". There's just been so many circumstances where I didn't feel safe, whether it was physically, mentally, emotionally, or psychologically in the world and at work. And as you know, 2 years ago, I was attacked in the park by somebody who was pretending to be a jogger. And it was hard to grapple with the idea that now I am a statistic, just like the other Asian people have been pushed down or, attacked without any regard for us also being human beings. And that really shook my faith and confidence in humanity. And I had so much anxiety to the point where it was hard for me to even open the door and walk outside. And so all the childhood traumas I had growing up in a very violent community where there was a lot of gang fights, where there was a lot of drive-by shootings, all that was awakened during this period. And I had to work really hard to not only face the trauma of being attacked in a park, that's my neighborhood park that I used to walk every day for the last 12 years, and trying to figure out that sense of safety and then reconciling what happened and healing what happened when I was younger. And so I think now that what I did during that period is I got a lot of therapy, and I highly recommend therapy. I got both talk therapy and EMDR therapy and group support. And I took classes as well to learn about these different things that I could do to help myself. And the lifestyle changes that I made is actually the foundation for the career gratitude journal that I have, which is having a practice of meditating by doing 10 deep breaths every morning, practicing gratitude about something that I appreciate in my life, surrounding myself with inspirational quotes and positive affirmations, and doing little self-care things every day. And it could be really small, like, drinking water. For me, a lot of it during that period was just open the door and walk outside to your front yard. Just do that. And then the next step was like, let's go outside the gate and walk around the block. So I shared that because I think that we often confidence is about how others perceive us, but really confidence is how we feel internally. And through this journey of healing, I've really realized, okay, this is who I am. This is who I want to show up in the world. And it's really helped me to pause and reflect about what I want to invite into my life and what I want to let go and release as well. And so I hope that anybody who's going through this journey knows that they can find that in themselves by pausing and reflecting and really affirming themselves and having love, compassion, and kindness to themselves.
Thank you so much for sharing that, and I'm so sorry that happened to you. I remember when you were sharing it, I was just wanting to make sure if you were okay, and I'm glad you were able to get the proper work to heal through it because it is a traumatic experience and it can bring a lot of anxiety. And when these things happen, especially during the anti-Asian hate era, a lot of people kept glamorizing the person attacking, the attacker versus the person who has been attacked. And people never knew the mental health consequences that come with it, the trauma, the anxiety. So I'm glad that you're able to share it. And Samorn, what was your life like before you discovered self-confidence?
Yeah, I wanted to say that I really appreciated you personally reaching out to me when that happened. And I'm getting a little emotional because I think that it was so hard to experience people not even reaching out and or telling me that my experience wasn't real. And this was also not just from people who identified as other ethnic origins or race, but other Asian women who were like, I've never experienced that. You can't say that you experienced that. And I think that kind of betrayal was so hurtful because you're expecting these people to support you. So it was really hard. So life before having that self-confidence really was a life where I was a type A workaholic, people-pleasing perfectionist. I had no boundaries. Like in the middle of this attack, I was part of this mom's Facebook group, and they were the ones who told me, oh, we can't talk about race, even though they say they support diversity, equity, and inclusion. And they said that they would put my post up if I removed any reference of race. And I said, but that is the point of the post, is to say that Asian Americans, and in particular women and elders, are being attacked during this pandemic because we are, brought in the news by the government as the face of the enemy. And it was a really terrible experience. And then they turned it around and said, we're dealing with the trauma of having to decide whether to post your post. Like literally telling this to me as a victim and saying that I'm crossing the boundaries by asking them to be accountable and to apologize. And it took me just until last week really to write them a response to that because it was just so hurtful. But also I was so angry and I wanted to write it in a way that framed the issue of saying like, hey, what you're doing is classic Darvel, denying and being the reverse victim. And by you saying that whether an Asian person is attacked is an opinion between different Black, Indigenous, and people of color, that, you can't take sides. Like, it's not about taking sides and it's not an opinion. Asian Americans are being attacked. Asian Americans have been documenting this. And the number that we see, thousands and thousands of people, sometimes even dying from this, is very real. And it's not something that's fake news. So it was hard to write the letter, but I'm really proud of writing the letter. I do not expect a response because they've had a pattern of behavior about this. There was even a news article about them doing something similar during the Black Lives Movement. But I think it's important for us to have the confidence to say, I'm going to speak up and stand up for myself because this is right. And this is about having dignity and respect for humans as human beings. And even if the other person isn't going to listen to you, isn't going to change their mind, that's not the goal or the end result. That would be nice. That would be a great bonus. But really, it's about having the courage to say, this is wrong, and I'm going to fight for myself. I'm going to stand up for myself, and I'm going to do it in a way where it's not going to cause myself more harm, or do it in a way where I'll look back on this and say, oh my gosh, I'm kind of embarrassed about how I approached that situation. So, now I'm able to do that, and I'm able to help my clients when they're talking about very difficult things, whether it's they're leading a team and somebody isn't being accountable. And, I was just coaching a woman through this, and she told the person, like, it's okay, we can fix it. And I paused her and I said, I get that you wanted to do that. Can you share why you said that? She's like, well, I kind of felt bad. The person was starting to kind of stress out. And I think a lot of us as Asian women identify like, oh my God, I don't want the other person to feel bad. And I said, I totally get that you want to be kind and supportive, but telling a person that you're managing who is missing deadlines and who isn't following through that it's okay because you can fix that mistake repeatedly is actually setting the both of you and the organization up for failure. In that moment, we could hold that person accountable while being compassionate. And actually the kindest thing is to give direct, candid feedback and say like, we have a good relationship. I want it to work from a place of trust. What I've noticed though is that you've missed deadlines, the last 3 months many times. And while we can fix it, this isn't something that we should have because these are standard deadlines that we have. What can we do together to work through this so that we can fix this? And, that prevents so many problems if you can just address it head on quickly. And it prevents, these long-term problems that would lead to frustration and resentment on both sides. Also would lead to micromanaging, right? No one wants that. So it's really about the courage to say, okay, this is what feels right for me. This is what I need to do for myself, or this is what I need to do for my team or my organization. And being able to have the conversation in a kind and direct way.
Thanks so much for sharing that. And I'm so sorry that, you went through that time with the Facebook group. And I know working as a lawyer, it takes a lot of toll on you, the number of hours of gaslighting, the toxic work culture. I've spoke to a lot of female lawyers who've gone through similar situations or even worse. And I just wanted to check, what was that aha moment that you realized, you can go out there and do something on your own, like finding career unicorns? Yeah, if you could just share that.
Yeah, there's so many aha moments. So, I was working at a university after I left my career as a big law lawyer because it was so toxic at the law firm where my partner was yelling at me. He'd throw papers on the desk, slam the doors, just humiliate me in front of everybody at the office and in front of our clients. And luckily I was able to, like, I reported him and then I was blackballed. I went from billing 250 to 300 hours a month to zero. And when you have zero billable hours, that's the death of your career in big law because you're only as good as your billable hours as a junior associate. So luckily, after a few months, I was brought onto another team to handle a matter that no one cared about, but it was for a big client. And we were supposed to lose, but we won really big because I found some key cases and key documents. And they were like, hey, now you can get to work on all these other wonderful projects that you've been wanting to work on. But that abusive behavior really made me realize, you know what? It's not worth trading your life in for this because I had so much anxiety dealing with that partner. I lost so much sleep because I was working 7 a.m. to 4 a.m. while I was in trial. I was having undiagnosable fatigue and chronic migraines and back pain. And it really made me pause to reflect, well, what do I want to do in my life? And I realized the thing that I love the most was mentoring and coaching other people. And so that led me to my job at Berkeley Law. But even at there and at the other law school that I was at, the universities have their own weird relation work stuff, right? Where professors are here at the highest place, and it's students and alums, and then staff is considered the lowliest of the lowly. And I really didn't like being in an environment where I was expected to overwork and overperform repeatedly. Like I was doing 2 to 3 people's jobs. At one school, I was the director of employer outreach. I was building out the boutique small and mid-sized firms. I was doing all the diversity events. At another law school, I was responsible for launching the Board of Governors mentorship program. I was responsible for 3Ls and all recent grads and all alum. And then everybody else had like a way smaller job. And of course, I think there's some dynamics around race, gender, and expectations, right? The intersectionality of all of that. Like, you are an Asian woman, so of course you just do whatever I ask you to do. If we ask you to do more, just do more. You're capable, so keep giving you more. And then on the other hand, they're like, you need to figure out your work-life balance. You're like, that's not a fair setup because you're literally setting me up to fail by giving me 3, 4 people's jobs, but then telling me like I need to manage my work-life balance when it's not possible to do all of these things within the work hours, right? And then it's frustrating and resentful where you see other people where they roll in at 10 and they leave at 3 or 4. They don't have that much work because what like at one office, one person's whole job was booking rooms for events. I'm like, why do we need a whole career counselor just to book rooms for events? Every year, maybe we have 10 events or 20 events, versus like you're in charge of 1/3 of the current students, all the recent grads and all alums. It just doesn't make sense. So I think there was a lot of frustrations around that and expectations of you need to do a lot of work, but we don't want you to also ask for things like ask for a raise or ask for a promotion because, you should know your place. And I think all of those dynamics are really hard and you face it a lot, especially as Asian women or women of color or even men of color. I work with, a lot of folks from that background and first generation professionals where they're like, just be grateful you have a job. And of course you are grateful for the job, but at the same time, there should also be a reciprocal relationship where your workplace should also be appreciative of you and try to protect you and make sure that you're not burning out too. So from that, I realized I started building my side business while I was working. And how I was building my side business, it was accidental. I went to give a talk, my first talk ever in front of people. Usually I'm the facilitator for the panel, but they were like, can you do the presentation? I was like, oh God. So I did it. And then after the presentation, several people came up to me and said, Samorn, can you work with me as your career coach? And that's how I started building my career. So I was working on my side business for about 5 hours a week. And in a year, I made more than my full-time salary. And so I decided, you know what, I should just go for it. And that's how I started. And when I started, I didn't have a website for 2 or 3 years. Everything was just through referral. I still use my Gmail account at the time. And I was able to build a very successful business and then eventually brand into career unicorns in 2018. And even when I came with career unicorns, this is when unicorns wasn't popular. People would tell me, oh, that's so silly or that's so unprofessional. I can't believe you like have that name. But I love the name and I'm really happy about it. And I feel like it really encapsulates who I am, that energy of you can build your dream life and your dream career. And you can do it in a way that's sustainable, that supports not just your career, but also all the things that you want to do outside in your life. And you can make a really good living doing all of that.
Thanks for sharing that great story. And I love how you mentioned, you just went for it. Sometimes we get so scared to go out there and make it happen. But here you are. You said, I'm just going to go full force. And now you're living your dream life, your dream career, and helping others do the same. And, to the woman who's listening to your episode, she may be in her own journey to confidence. What would be that one tip you'd give to her?
The one tip I would give is to quiet the noise because there's so much noise in the outside world. And when you're young, these expectations and noise is so big, right? Whether it's from your family, from your friends, you need to go to college, you need to go to grad school, you need to go to med school, law school, business school, whatever it is. You need to get married, you need to have kids. It like never ends, especially for women and Asian women in particular. And then there's also the cultural expectations of you need to show up submissive, you need to be respectful, you need to be humble, all these messages, right? And what I would say is quiet the noise because when the noise is so loud, you can't hear your own voice and you pause and reflect, and as you hear your own voice, you'll start to realize what it is that you actually want. And that's a big reason why I wrote the gratitude journal too, is it's because the art of writing pen and paper is lost. And people are like, you need to do a audiobook and ebook. And maybe at some future version we do that. But really there is an art to putting pen to paper, whether it's with the gratitude journal that I have, or even just on a blank paper, where if you could just sit and quiet the noise and write whatever is coming up for you. If you do this consistently just for a few minutes every day, you will start to see patterns in your thought patterns and recognize, like, okay, what is it that I'm hearing? And when it's on paper, the other thing that's really easy and helpful is you can see, is this my noise, my thoughts, my feelings, or is this what people are imposing on me? And what's actually really coming up for me? And it's only until you get to that place where you can hear yourself and hear your heart yearning that you can realize what your own desires and dreams and aspirations are. And from that place, you can then take these small, consistent actions to really build your dream life and your dream career.
Thanks for sharing that great advice. And if our listeners want to get to know a little bit more about you and what you do, check out your book. Is there any links or social media profiles we can connect with?
Yeah, people can check out www.careerunicorns.com. That's my website. It'll give a lot of information about myself. You can also follow me on LinkedIn. Type in Samorn Selim, Samorn, last name Selim. I'm the only Samorn Selim, so it's easy to find. And check out my book, The Career Unicorns 90-Day 5-Minute Gratitude Journal, an easy and proven way to cultivate mindfulness, beat burnout, and find career joy. The book is just so simple and easy. At the moment, we're keeping it at $9.99 to make it accessible for people from all backgrounds from different countries. At some point that might change. The business team is like, you need to increase your prices. But for now, I'm like, hey, let's try to make it as accessible as possible. So yeah, check those things out. And, if you ever want to work together, either one-on-one coaching or invite me to speak and do trainings for your organizations, you can just reach out through the website at careerunicorns.com.
All right, thanks for sharing that. And to our listeners, if you want to connect with Samorn, you can also head on over to thetaoofselfconfidence.com and search for Samorn's name. Her show notes will pop up along with everything else that we talked about. And I just really want to thank Samorn today for taking the time to share her story and wisdom on the podcast. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me on, Sheena. This was so lovely. And I'm just excited about the world and, both what you and I bring into the world and supporting people to feel like, hey, no matter where you are, no matter where you start, just start today. And if you do that consistently, you will see a better future for yourself tomorrow.
Awesome. Thank you for that great message. And it was so great to have you on the show. And to our listeners, be on the lookout for another new episode of another amazing woman's journey to self-confidence. And we'll talk to you soon. Bye for now. Thank you for tuning in to another amazing episode of The Tao of Self-Confidence. Please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify to get your daily boost of confidence.